Okay, let's try this again. So, I'm having a lot of technical issues at the minute with primarily Wi-Fi and stuff. So I'm going to try and do this. If it doesn't work, I don't really know what to do about it, other than call up my internet provider and give them bollocking, because everything was literally just changed to fibre for the express purpose of me being able to do this. So we'll see. But I'm going to try and run this anyway, and I'm going to jump back in with something a little bit different. So, okay, right. So, plan is to, as the title suggests, display my latest cosplay, because it occurred to me I had a mannequin out here that just had an outfit on it. Why not try to display the one that I am the most proud of? So I'm going to try and do that. This camera is set up to look down, so hopefully I can then get most of it in frame, but I'll see how lucky I get. And I'll talk about bits as I go through and explain stuff, because I've not had the opportunity to do so, and I quite like yapping about that. So let me try and shift Boris into view. Okay. You can kinda see. Can I bring this any closer? And drop it any lower? Ish. Because I'd like to talk about the leggings, but also I didn't want to bring him on stream and have him not in the leggings, because it's just a little bit obscene. So I guess I'll start with the legs. For context, this is my Fierce Deity cosplay. So, leggings. They are just basic bitch black leggings that I got from Primark, and then I tried my hand at airbrushing to get, like, the kind of muscle definition in the legs. I really hope that kind of shows up on the small webcam, but I was pretty proud with how they came out, to be honest. I'd never airbrushed anything before this, and I elected not to practice before doing this. I just kind of did it. So, yeah, considering that was how that went, not a horrendous run of things, I don't think. It all ended up working out pretty well, so I'll roll with it. Okay, so leggings exist. The boots, I'm not gonna put a lot of claim to, because I didn't make the boots. I bought the boots, and then took some sandpaper to the boots, and just made them kind of a little rougher in places, you know? So, the boots exist, but they weren't me. And also, I can't put them on his feet because he's attached to the stand by, like, a little thing in the back of his leg, so yeah. Maybe I'll try and do one of the boots later, but that just seems kind of pointless. So, anyway, the boots weren't me. I'm trying to remember, because as I'm putting this on him, I have to remember how it's all meant to go together, and I've not worn this since October. And it's all more complicated than you'd expect it to be, especially by the time it gets to, like, the armor and stuff. So, I have to remember what I did next. Pretty sure it'd be all of this stuff. So, one of the big things when it comes to designing how cosplays are going to go together will always be, like, your personal constraints. My biggest issue is that I am agonizingly temperature sensitive. So everything that I ever make, and every time I design how I'm going to put something together, I always have to base it around what is going to be the least warm. So, because this cosplay was going to have a bunch of layers, I made it in such a way that the underneath layers are cropped. because then I've just got a couple of layers less against me around my midriff, and that was considerably better than if I hadn't done it. So that's why all of this is cropped, rather than being like a full tunic. So I believe it would have been this next, and then the skirt, but also I might struggle to do that. But then it's elasticated, so let me see. Let me see. Because putting things on myself versus putting them onto a mannequin, you know, static, less so. So I might have to do this in a slightly different way, but let me see. Because this was the tunic skirt. The weathering on it I'm extremely pleased with. This was another one of those things that, like, I didn't practice beforehand, I just did it, and it worked out pretty well. So all of the patterning that is on this was me. This whole... Alright. Let me yap for a minute. So, the whole premise around this Fierce Deity iteration was that I wanted to combine the two darkest Zelda games in the series into one outfit. So I took Fierce Deity from Majora's Mask and basically placed it within the Twilight Princess universe. That was my brief that I gave myself. So everything about this is deliberately kind of darker and grittier, and also I was going to say stole, but I didn't steal. I repurposed a bunch of elements from Twilight Princess and applied them to this. So the patterns that are on the tunic are derived from the light spirits from Twilight Princess. So there are a bunch of things in this outfit that are like... they're kind of like Easter eggs. And when I was in for judging for all of this, I wanted to just reel off as quick as I could all of, like, the important stuff. So I didn't really get the chance to yap about, like, all the weird specifics that I'd included. And I put it into my build book, but I wanted to explain, like, you know, even the tiny details in this are extremely specific. And that's why when it came to, like, thinking about displaying this out here, I was just going to whack it all on a mannequin and be done with it. But then figured, actually, I kind of want to yap about it. So I think I will. So that's why I'm here. Yes. Light spirit patterns. And also, it's, again, the tiny details that are so objectively insignificant, but I care a lot. So I will try and get it on this camera, but I don't know how easy it is to see or whether it'll focus. But all of the seams that I'd sewn, first off, the top stitching is immaculate, and that I'm extremely proud of my top stitching. But also, I went back over and hand-stitched across in varying sorts of directions to make it look like it was all put together by hand. Because again, thematically, that is very much closer to the vibes of both Majora's Mask and Twilight Princess. So literally every single seam... I wonder if I can get it on the main cam. Can I? Sort of. Ish. Please focus. You can kind of see. There we go. So every single seam that I have in this entire cosplay is like that. So I took ages being real specific with it. Focus back on me again. There we go. Okay. So yeah, literally everything is painfully detailed. and I actually ended up getting direct compliments for my seams from the judges, which felt great, because I care a lot about my seams, and I always have, and I'm really fussy with it. So, yes. And then as far as weathering, this was another thing that I had done for the first time with this, without testing it, and just thought, we'll see how it goes. So, the lower edges were all ripped with a seam ripper, and then I took a little sandpaper to it and kind of tore it up like that. So all of this was done for like the lowermost edges, because the whole thing with weathering is like, it looks best based on logic, right? So where anything would actually wear or get dirty, that's how you want to play it. So it was very much a case of thinking about, in practical terms, if you're wearing something, where are the problem areas, right? So obviously, the lowermost hem of the tunic got blitzed. The netting underneath is like chainmail. That was the purpose of that. It's literally just a mesh top that I found in TK Maxx and then cut up. So I didn't have time to make chainmail from scratch, and I honestly, it looked pretty good, so I'm cool with it. But yes, so the lowermost hem obviously is going to be scuffed, but also I went along all of the seams as well, because of the fact that the fabric meets there, it creates a little dip. So if you have any dirt or grime, it's going to get caught within that. So all of the seams were also lightly gone over. I think I just dry brushed them, to be honest. I don't think I airbrushed any of these. No, I would have just dry brushed them. So yeah, all of the seams went along as well, and then the degree to which anything was scuffed was very much based on, again, the sensibilities. So this is the most scuffed part of the entire tunic, because it would be. But as we go along, you'll see that also I've done things like in the armpits, because yes, they'll get grody, and the seams along the shoulders as well. So that's just the best way of playing it that I found. And then as far as how I actually weathered stuff, I had to do a little bit of research on this, because I'd never weathered anything to this extent before. I dabbled a little bit for my Huntress cosplay, but that was a lot easier, because that was kind of just scuffing the whole thing. Whereas this, I wanted to be sort of more specific with it, because I wanted to still have that sort of horror-esque vibe to it, but I knew that I wasn't going to need to have the entire thing be completely wrecked. And also, I spent a very long time making it really nice, and it caused me physical pain to make it not nice, but it looks significantly better like this than it did pristine, so I will deal with it. But I wanted to make sure that I was doing this strategically, rather than just making a mess. So what I did was I took, like, you know, you get like those spray bottles, like the atomizers. You can pick them up in like Boots and Superdrug. They just have them. So it's one of those, and I made a mixture of black and brown acrylic paint and water, and that's literally all this is. So I started off with the initial mix, hung everything up on the washing line so that when it dripped down, it collected where was sensible. And then went in for the darkest, or for where would be the darkest points first. Then once I'd done that, I put more water in, and then went back over where it'd be slightly lighter, then more water, and you get the picture. So concentrated the darkest points where it would be darkest, and then gradually worked my way up to where it would have been less scuffed. So that's how I got that really nice gradient to everything. So the weathering was fun, but definitely required a lot of consideration, and also water and gravity and everything being directional. So it's one of those you very much have to think about it. It's one of those sorts of things. But when I had thought about it, everything worked out really nice, and I'm very pleased with it. So, something else that's worth noting about the skirt. I had made the tunic based on a tunic pattern that I just had lying around, because I've grown up sewing, and over the years you collect a lot of patterns. So I just used a basic bitch tunic pattern, and I used it in the biggest size that was available, but the skirt wasn't quite big enough, because the tunic is meant to be a top, right? So it's meant to sit higher than this needed to. So what I ended up doing was taking a triangle out of the side seams so that I had more movement and more room to swish my legs about. And then because that was also stylistically reminiscent of the Twilight Princess tunic, I could justify it. So I did, and everything was fine. But this was kind of an afterthought that I made into a feature. And then I did the same sort of hand-stitchy thing around the seam, but also, because this was such a tiny, tiny seam, and I don't know whether it's going to show on this camera or not, so I might just try the bigger one, but you can kind of see. So this seam is extremely small. So what I ended up doing, because this fabric, as you can see, frays to oblivion, which is desirable for a lot of things, but for this it's kind of a and because that seam is so crazy tiny, what I did was seal these edges on the inside with clear nail varnish. I've done that for a lot of cosplays before, and I just find that it's the easiest way of stopping everything from fraying for those kinds of teeny tiny seams. I'm just checking the stream bitrate because it seems to be tanking again, but I'm going to keep going. I'm going to keep trying. And if it cuts out a bunch, then I apologise. I will continue trying to fix it. I'm working on getting a new laptop, because the one I'm running off of is extremely old and doesn't like me a whole bunch anymore. And because my phone still connects to the Wi-Fi, I'm wondering whether this is just a problem with my laptop, because it might be. So, yeah. Let me try refreshing the stream preview and seeing whether anything has changed or updated. Because if it keeps crashing and burning, I might hit BRB for a bit and wait for it to stabilize again. Yeah, no, it's definitely crashing. Okay. Right, let me hit let me hit BRB, and I will wait for it to fix itself. Although it seems to have immediately fixed itself, so maybe it's fine. Right, I'm going to try and keep a closer eye on that. Because that bitrate is going to be the death of me. So I'm gonna try and monitor it a little bit more closely. Because nothing's ever easy. So, okay. I will continue on, and I'll try and get this on here. Because it's elastic, so it should just pull over the top. And because I've not got his arms on, hopefully it won't be an issue. But we'll see. Oh yeah, that's fine. Okay. So, Boris has considerably smaller hips than me. So on me, I pulled this up to about, what? Sort of here-ish. But on him it's going to slide down, so I'm going to ignore that for now. And just continue on anyway. Because this will eventually be tucked in under a bodice regardless, so who cares? So moving on, I now get to the cropped stuff. So there's an undershirt and the tunic that goes over the top. So I will start with the undershirt. Because this was another one of those bits that I'd airbrushed. Now, again, the whole thing with the layers and the trying to keep myself reasonably cool. This is hella cropped. So, you know, it is ridiculous. But also, as far as like the faux chainmail, it's just a couple of little tiny sleeves that I'd tacked on to the top itself. So it served the purpose, and it was deep enough that when I lifted my arms, you would see this and not this. And that's all it needed to be, so that was then fine. And then the neck was airbrushed. A lot of the airbrushing I tried to do while I was wearing this, because I was very conscious of the fact that the way I am is very different to the way that Boris is. And I was going to be the one wearing it, so I wanted it to fit me. The neck was an exception to this rule, because it literally had to be. So, yeah. That was outside of my control, to be honest. So that sits on there like that. And as you can see, it does not come down very far at all. Just enough to serve the purpose. And that's the full extent. So, then I had this that went over the top of that. Now, this was another one of those things that I had to turn a cock-up into a feature for. So, what had happened was it's the same premise as what happened with the skirt, in that I'd assembled the thing, and then the sleeves were way too tight. For the range of motion that I needed to have to be able to get this bloody great sword up over my head, and the sword was its own issue, I needed to have more give in the sleeves. So what I did was I cut a huge triangle out of the main sleeve. It's hard to show, but there we go. Okay, so I cut a huge triangle out of the sleeves and then inserted a pleated white piece. Now, the immediate question would be, why would you not just put a blue bit in there and then call it a day, or recut the sleeves out of the blue and then you're fine? So the patterning that I'd done on all of this was done after everything had been assembled. And I'll explain why. So, right. This fabric was not blue. This fabric was plain linen. So it was kind of like an off-white. I got it as it was like an on-sale, bulk roll of linen, and I could get it really cheap, and I wanted it to be linen because fabric choices matter when it comes to cosplay and the themes, and I wanted it to be a very clearly woven natural fibre, because that just suits the universe, you know? I didn't want anything synthetic because that just wouldn't make any sense for a sort of medieval-esque world for this to exist within. So the linen wasn't blue. And I'd done that deliberately because the patterning was done with a very specific method. It's called batik, and it involves putting wax on fabric in the pattern that you want, then dyeing the fabric, and then melting off the wax to leave the pattern. So that's how I patterned all of this. And because the patterns are so specific and complicated, I didn't want to put myself through the agony of trying to pattern match when I was constructing this after the fact. So I sewed everything together first, then batik patterned everything, and then dyed it after that. So when it came to cutting a chunk out of the sleeve, I didn't have any spare fabric to insert in there. But I did have a load of plain linen left. So, because it's going to be exactly the same as the pattern colour, I decided I would just make it a feature. And that's why I've got these fun little pleats in both the sleeves, because I'm an idiot. But now it's again, you make it a feature and it's then fine. And honestly, it wound up looking kind of cool, so I don't mind it a whole bunch. So that's why that's there. And then, as before, all the seams, the top stitching is lush, and then I went back over and made it look a little more scuffed. And so you could argue that I wouldn't need to top stitch along both sides because this is meant to look scuffed, and because, no one's going to see the insides, right? It's not going to matter. However, because I was competing with this, I wanted to make sure that I'd included all my best qualities, right? And top stitching has always been one of my strongest areas. So I wanted to make sure that I had showcased exactly how agonizing I am over my top stitching. But also, I wanted to then go back retroactively and make it more thematically appropriate. And I did get some pretty high praise for my seams. So I think that as a strap paid off. So let me try and stick this on here. Now, as far as sticking Boris's arms on, that's probably not going to be a thing because the armour sticks out. And I don't think I'll be able to have the armour on and have his arms on, because his arms are too close to his sides. So that's probably going to be one of those things that I just have to suck up and go, oh well. There's so many loose threads on this, it's hilarious. Right. These are all caught, so let me untuck those. And those. Try and pull this down. Okay. Oh yeah, I'd also airbrushed the sleeves, but you can't really see on that cam. So just trust that I did do it. Source, trust me, bro. Okay, so that was how that went. Cool. So, let me drink some water before I forget again, because I keep forgetting. Right, from there, it gets a little bit complicated. Again, I don't think the arms are going to be a thing that can happen. So I'll save that for now. And what I'll do next is the bodice. So when I was designing this, initially I wanted to have the segments that Fierce Deity has in the original design. Realistically, I ran out of time. I'd started making them and then decided to cut my losses and make something that I knew how to make and had made before. And also because it's sewing, it's like I don't have to wait for chemicals to cure, you know? So I decided I would just make a bodice because that was sensible, and I did. So this is all faux leather, or leatherette, or pleather. It's all assembled in panels from a bodice pattern that I already just had kicking about, because I do, of course I do, that's just standard. So, bunch of different panels, all sewn together with a leather needle in the sewing machine. Again, I'm extremely proud of all my top stitching, so this was another one of those means of showing off, basically. And then I went back over and hand-stitched a bunch of extra stitches in, just to, again, try and make it look a little more handmade rather than machine-made. But this I was not as concerned with, because, you know, in the competing sense, like, everyone expects you to use a sewing machine, it's fine, and because it was a means of showing off the top stitching, I was also fine with it, but I still wanted to get, like, those little hand-done elements into it, so that, for me, is good enough. The finish that I have on this, because it's got that kind of dappled effect to it, that's because I literally painted this. This was all, like, dry brushed with a bunch of different colours and tones and shades of acrylic paint, and it was the same tones that I used for painting the armour. So this then ties in beautifully with the armour pieces that I have here. So on camera it doesn't quite show how closely matched these are, but they're pretty close. So that then works out. And the red lacing I had done to tie in with another part for the hat that you'll see later, so it all makes sense. And I will explain those bits when I get to them. So the inside of this, it's just literally like an old curtain lining. I got a bunch of fabric from a mate of mine, because their gran was moving house and wasn't using any of it. They asked if I'd want it, I said absolutely. So this is all old curtain fabric, because I wanted to have something... I didn't want to use like a typical lining fabric for this, because A, no one was going to see it, so who cares? And B, linings are typically like satiny, silky, kind of that sort of vibe. And this was going to be up against my skin, and I didn't want that, because I knew I'd get really sweaty, and I didn't want to be slimy, because that's just the worst feeling ever. So this is all super cottony and nice, and felt really comfy, and that's all I cared about. And also, happens to be the same fabric that I'd made my initial toile from, because as much as I'm super anti-testing stuff before I get going with sewing, this was one of those things I literally had to test, because the corset pattern that I was working from was a women's pattern, so the sides went in at quite a steep curve, so I'd straightened it right out, and I needed to test how that fit against me. So I made the toile from the same stuff. And yeah, it was really comfy, and also didn't cost me anything, which is nice. Now, this is very specific. So this little pouch that I have sewn in at the back, that was to hold a battery pack. And I'll explain that when I get to it. But for now, just know that this is here. And it's important. Now, am I going to be able to get this over you? Or can I get this down from here? Right, let me see if I can be smart with this. Because what I might have to do is slide this on him from down low and then reconnect his torso. So let me mess with that and see if I can get that to work. Because I don't really want to have to unlace a whole bunch of stuff if I can help it. Which I think is fine. Yeah, sweet. Okay. Come on, you know you want to. There we go, right. So, there's also a panel back here that is separate to the rest of it. It's sewn in on this side, it's not sewn in on this side. And that's so that there's always something that will be behind the lacing that matches this. And because it's free, I can open up this entire thing if I want to. And it's not going to matter, because by the time it's closed, there will always be this behind here. So you're never seeing through to whatever's underneath the corset. So, if I pull your leggings back up, this was where things got tricky, because I needed to have the tunic skirt come up and underneath the corset, something to that effect, because this is what held everything together. So then it was just a case of lacing all of this up, which I might have to do at an angle. Or I'm just going to be giving myself grief. Right, let's try and do it like this. Because, weirdly enough, it was kinda easier to do this on myself in front of a mirror than it is to do this onto a mannequin. Because I could at least tell where things were supposed to sit. But like this, it's tricky. So, just bear with while I try and figure out how I want this to go together. Because I'm not entirely sure how high or low I need this to go. That seems about right down there. Because this corset sat up pretty high, because it had to come up underneath where the chest armour was. And then I want to make sure I'm tucking all of that cropped top in as well. Now, Boris is a different shape to me, so this isn't going to look as effective on him as it did on me, but we will try anyway. That seems like it's in roughly the right place. Now, something I was very fussy about when I was lacing this up pre-competition was making sure that all of the lacing was sitting flat. I'm going to be less bothered about it currently, because this is just for display purposes, and it's honestly whatever. But know that that was something that I was careful with and cared about at the time. everything said that I am bothered by this not sitting the way that I want it to, so maybe I will fix it. Or at least fix it-ish. Like, when it comes to actually wearing this in October this year, because I am going to bust this out again, I will relace it properly. Like, I'll take all of the lacing out, I will iron it, and then I will do this all again. Because that's how I did this originally. Like, none of this is sewn to be like this. It was all originally a strip of bias tape that was that wide. All I did was fold it in half and iron it to make it as wide as it is here. So I just have to do that again to fix it. So that's not really an issue. So, with that like that, because it's not going anywhere, I'll just do that, and then I just tucked it in up the top like that. That was it. Okay. Right. Back in business. So, with that in, yeah, cool. Before I forget, there was also a necklace that I'd made. Well, painted rather than made. So, one of the features of the original Fierce Deity design is like the little blue orbs that were on his neck. I'd originally thought about making those as they were, as like the sort of half sphere type things, and then just having magnets and sticking them underneath. But in the end, I'd actually wound up taking an awful lot of inspo from samurai armour and aesthetic for the final thing, which you'll see in the armour, and I'll explain that when I get to it. So, as part of that, I actually quite like the idea of having just like a wooden necklace, which I picked up in a charity shop for like a couple of quid, and then I just sanded down each of these beads. All of this has been left on the necklace the whole time. I'd thought about just restringing a new necklace, but then this was already so convenient that I thought, really, nah, I'll just leave it strung as is and paint it as is. So what I did was sanded every individual bead just to get like the varnish off, and then I went through and painted all of